Joe Biden says the most important election in our lifetime is just 8 days away, but he sure isn't acting like it. Old Sleepy Joe is kicking his feet up in Delaware this weekend while letting his former boss do all the hard work. Biden keeping it low-key by voting early for the midterms. Weird, though, he had to show an ID. And with Joe MIA from the campaign trail, Democrats are turning to Barack Obama to rescue him from a midterm shellacking. Yeah, the guy who lost the most seats in a midterm in half a century is Democrats' best hope to stop a red wave.
The only way to save democracy is if we together nurture it and fight for it. And that starts with electing people who know you and see you and care about you.
Every Republican politician seems obsessed with just two things. Own the libs. Yeah, let's own the libs. They're interested in making you angry and then finding somebody to blame. And they're hoping that that'll distract you from the fact that they don't have any answers of their own.
Even the media realizes that Biden's the Democrats' worst messenger.
Joe Biden can't be out there, so this is the only person they can put out.
The Democrats hope that he's the closer. I mean, I talked to two people yesterday just in regular conversations, like, Barack Obama's so good at this. And I think that's what they're counting on, especially for that youth vote.
He energizes young voters, we need those millennials, we need those Gen Zs. He energizes young people and the base of the Democratic Party like no one else.
And the White House is going full Baghdad Bob by insisting that Biden's out there campaigning.
Why is the former president making this case and not the current president?
So I would disagree with that characterization of your question or how it was characterized there. The president has been talking about this almost every day for months now. He's been talking about the choices that are at stake here, which is what I was just talking about a moment ago, which is what Republicans are trying to do.
All right, Dana Perino.
Yeah.
What did you think of Barack Obama's message?
Well, I think that he can still give a stem winder. He can still rally the base. And most of the Democrats who went to those events were thinking that they really wish there wasn't an amendment that said he couldn't run for a third term. They would rather have him do it. When Joe Biden says this is the most important election in our lifetime, what he really means is it's the most important election is in his lifetime, because the outcome will define his legacy and his fate. Because if it's a washout for the Democrats, then just watch. At 12:01 on election night, everyone starts to turn to 2024, and the questions will be, will he run again? President Obama also has basically been left with what the Biden administration has to work with, which is not a coherent economic message, but what they've tried to do is say, yes, we drove the car in the ditch, but you should let us keep driving, because if the Republicans take over, it's going to be even worse. But how can you say that? We're already in the ditch. There was an interesting piece in that CBS poll that came out. Obama and Biden have tried to say that the Republicans have no plan. They have no ideas. They have no plan. They're just out there saying that they're going to do something, but they won't do anything. Well, in this poll, 59% of voters say Democrats haven't offered a clear plan on what they're going to do to keep power, and 55% say the same thing about Republicans. That's not good for either party. But it does show you that the Democrats have spent all this time and all this money on abortion, on January 6th, and also on saying that the Republicans are worse or the Republicans don't have a plan, and that message hasn't stuck.
Greg, maybe Joe's got it all figured out, relax in Delaware and have your old boss out there doing the work.
I don't think he knows he's being ignored. I think they have competing events on a soundstage. He's convinced he's actually out there campaigning. He has no idea. That's what I would do. You have to stop talking about shellacking. I'm telling all of my liberal friends, I have thousands, not to fall for this red wave stuff. It's all exaggerated. You guys don't even have to vote. Don't even have to vote. There's no way that Fetterman, there's no way that Kerry Lake or Herschel Walker is going to win. I am so pessimistic about the Republicans that I believe that the Democrats should have a pre-election party on Monday night. Just get bombed. Totally bombed. Sleep in Tuesday. Don't even bother. Everything's good. What upsets me about Obama, there's two Obamas. There's the Obama that spoke sense a couple of weeks ago, talking about how the Democrats should be happier or be nicer and get rid of this woke stuff. And then everything he just said there is the opposite. It's exactly the kind of Twitter hyperbole. Saving democracy. That's what the crazy people say. That's for Max Boot and that Jennifer Rubin. It's not for you. You're sane. But when you say that stuff, you sound crazy. And then the owning the libs thing, that's Twitter speak. People at home don't wander around going, I'm going to own the libs. So he's like, he kind of like, he basically cut himself into two Obamas. And I found that kind of sad. But it's really weird to be in a party where you don't want the people voting for you to see who leads the party. It kind of reminds me of the House of Cards when Kevin Spacey, the scandal destroyed the franchise. So they thought they could do the show without him. That's what they're doing with Joe. I don't think it's going to work.
Katie, were you inspired? You saw a crowd reaction to Barack Obama? I mean, that was more clapping than I've ever seen at a Biden rally.
Well, he's there trying to get the base out late in the game, but he's also, when he goes out there, inspiring conservative base to get out and vote as well. They remember the Obama years. President Obama doesn't have a lot of credibility when it comes to midterm elections. He is the one who's responsible for saying, quote, we got shellacked after the 2010 elections as a result of governing much like Joe Biden has governed by pushing through huge pieces of transformational legislation for the country, Obamacare being one of them, without a single Republican vote, no bipartisanship. That's the reason why they won the House back on the Tea Party movement. Republicans did. When it comes to his argument in this speech that he gave, he claims that Republicans are trying to make you angry. They keep doing this thing where they're insulting voters as if they don't know what they're voting for, as if they don't know that the issues on the economy, on inflation, on crime are issues that affect them in a way that aren't about Republicans making them angry. They're angry because their streets are not safe. They're angry because they can't afford groceries anymore. So for Democrats to repeatedly go out and say, well, it's the Republicans trying to make you angry about things that don't exist, according to us, I don't think that's going to work when it comes to independent voters who are still on the fence up until Election Day, but especially among people who are really hurting and talking about voting based on the top issues that are beneficial for Republicans right now.
You speak to Katie's point there.
Okay.
Now.
What? Jesse.
Is that really what's happening? Or is the country angry?
Yeah.
Is the country angry because Greg Gutfeld has made them angry?
Yes.
Or Lindsey Graham has made them angry? Or are they angry because there's a crime wave, an open border, and everything costs too much?
Well, mostly about the inflation part and the crime part, which is factoring heavily into a lot of races that Democrats would be putting away. We're going to talk about the governor's race here in New York. Pennsylvania, it's obviously a huge issue. Wisconsin, where President Obama was featured. But I watched both rallies. I was actually in Georgia over the weekend, and the energy is huge, both for Walker and for Warnock and Abrams and Kemp. People are fired up, and it's always exciting to be in a swing state where your vote actually matters. I don't have that happen that often.
Except this year, it's a swing state.
We'll see how swingy it is. But I thought President Obama's message actually was consistent with what he was saying about staying away from the woke stuff. He talked about a lot of bread and butter issues that the administration hasn't been talking about. He acknowledged inflation, and he said it's bad. It is bad all over the world, but it's bad. Don't say that it isn't bad. And the one thing that he hit that I do not understand, right, is at the core of the Democratic message is what happens if Rick Scott's plan goes into effect to Medicare and Social Security. And it's about a 1.5 minute clip of him talking about Social Security and how people in Wisconsin work their whole lives to get that money. And that if Republicans get into office, they're going to means test things. They're going to scale back entitlements that you've worked for. And I do not know why Democrats aren't leading with that.
Can I ask you?
Because it doesn't work.
Can I ask you a serious question?
Well,
What Republican president recently has attacked and gone after and reduced Social Security?
no one has been able to.
Right.
But that
And how
doesn't
many
mean that it
Republican
isn't his
presidents
plan.
have we had in the last 50 years? We've had quite a lot, but they've never actually done what they're always being accused of.
Is it in Rick Scott's plan? In his commitment
The
to
one
America?
Republican in the entire Senate, yes. The one.
Well, but he's the only one who put out a plan to the point of what are Republicans going to do. He's the only one. And Mitch McConnell came out and said, I have nothing to do with that. But he didn't put his plan forward, right? So you guys tell me.
Kevin
what's the big
McCarthy
Republican plan?
laminated a really nice plan.
Yeah,
What was
and-
it called again, Dana?
Commitment to America?
The Commitment to America. Have you read the commitment?
It takes 4 seconds,
Does it
by the way.
slash Social Security? It does not. Conversation over.